Hey, folks, welcome back to the Kangaroo Leadership Podcast. Hey, this is podcast number 2 today, which is a lot of fun. And we always have a diverse bunch of folks. So Charles is with us today. I'm going to let him introduce you. But as I always promise on the podcast, is I'm going to give you leaders that are kangaroo leaders. They're moving forward. They have a story. They've developed something along the way through trial, tribulation, experience. Usually we learn more from making mistakes. And then sometimes we write about it. And sometimes this literature is invaluable to us. And so we're always looking for a nugget and how to move forward in life, especially as leaders, which, there's no science behind leadership. Every interaction is different, and we have to be who we need to be in the moment of truth. So anyway, without further ado, Charles, hey, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, where you grew up, all those kind of things, and what your journey is and what your passion is, and then we'll chat some leadership.
Okay, thank you very much, Dave. And thank you for having me on this podcast. So I'm Charles Spinosa. I have been a management consultant for the last 28 years, working in Europe, in the United States, Canada, Latin America, and a tiny bit in China. And I've worked with leaders from startups to Fortune 500 companies over those years, all sorts of leadership problems, but I'm really expert in culture change, helping an organization go from a culture of fear or resignation to a culture of hope or zeal, leadership development, of course, and then helping leaders develop new product propositions, new customer propositions. Those three things actually go together. When you're changing a culture, it gives you more capacity to deliver new services and products to people. And as you change the culture, you generally need to grow as a leader as well. So I've brought those three together, sometimes separately, sometimes one at a time. I have an unusual background. I need to admit it, and you'll hear me talk about it in the podcast. I didn't start out in business. I actually started out as a professor in the humanities. I started out as a Shakespeare professor, and I taught at Miami University in Ohio. And I did most of my early publication, not on Shakespeare. I did do some, but on philosophy. And so I moved to teaching philosophy and taught philosophy at UC Berkeley. And those two subjects have really guided my leadership coaching, my understanding of how you change cultures, and what I've done with leaders throughout. And I've just recently written a book, Leadership as Masterpiece Creation, and that sort of brings the humanities side of it together. I see businesses as, when leaders really get going in them, as distinctive, ethical, or moral, if you'd like, masterpieces. And that's what my leadership work and my consulting has been about for at least the last 10 years. It took me a while to figure out what it's all about. But in a certain sense, it's pretty simple. And I think we can see leaders doing this all the time. The place I'd like to start is walk around your neighborhood and look at the different small businesses and the different visions those owners have. And they have very strong views. What's the right way to treat customers? What's the right way to treat employees? What's the right way to treat owners? And what's the right way to treat suppliers? But then it's not just what's the prudent way, what's the way that's going to make me the most money. When they own those little businesses, they're putting their heart on the line. They're putting what they believe is right on the line. And that's a moral stance. In my own neighborhood, I'm in the Upper East Side of Manhattan, there are 2 hardware stores. When you walk in, you smell soap, you hear classical jazz music, and you can't walk halfway down the aisle without somebody asking you if you need help. Another one, you walk in, you hear popular music, you smell 3-in-1 oil, which is an oil for tinkering with machines. There might be somebody stacking a shelf far away, and there might be somebody at the cash register, and it's very much a do-it-yourself kind of store. Those are 2 different views on how it is to treat a customer, what a customer is, a do-it-yourselfer or someone in need of help, right? And how to treat employees, what's the right way to be employees, get the shelf stacked, handle the cash register, help the customer, do whatever the customer takes. Those are 2 different views of what's right. Now, we see that in all the stores around us, small businesses. We also see it in the mold breaking businesses. Larry Page and Sergey Brin, They created a company, Google, and it's quite different from other companies. What do you do there? Well, at Google, at least in the early days and on and off when they feel rich, you spend 20% of your time pursuing your dream. Not just working for Google, but working for something cool that's your dream. And you promise psychological safety. When you're in Google, you can say anything. People are not going to get upset with you. That's Google. Compare that, a few states north, to Amazon. Jeff Bezos created a company that's first and foremost value was ruthlessness. Not ruthlessness, relentlessness. In fact, if you look up relentless and you put that on your browser, you're likely to get Amazon. He was thinking of naming the company that to begin with. You never think of working less than 60 hours a week at Amazon. And in fact, he nearly fired his logistics genius. And you think how important logistics is to Amazon. His logistics genius because the guy wanted to play Frisbee and not work 60 hours a week. The next thing at Amazon was raising the bar on each employee. And that was so important to Bezos that he forcibly retired his founding employee, the employee that created the site, Shel Kaplan, when he couldn't manage the creation of the next site. So those are two morally distinctly different companies that produce, first of all, different goods in the world, but different cultures and different ways of being. And my sense is, and this is the thing that took me a long time to learn, and takes a long time for most consultants to learn, that most business leaders want to realize their moral vision in their businesses. They're taught by consultants like me, by business schools, that that's not what they're to do. They're supposed to get operational excellence every step of the way. They're focused on operational goods, profits, market share. You can add customer satisfaction. You can add employee satisfaction, but it's all to be looked at operationally. And consultants like me in business schools, what do? Well, we give them lots of recipes to do that. And when you're in business, when you're running a business, there's a hell of a lot to do. And so those recipes are nice. And in my experience, that's what clutters the lives of most leaders in business. But the fact of the matter is, when you go and you promise a board, or when you promise your senior boss, if you're in charge of a division, an operational change, you end up having to change the way people work, change the way employees deal with each other, and change the way they deal with customers. Usually also change the way they deal with suppliers. And so you are, in fact, making the kinds of changes that you make if you're going to create a morally distinctive organization or morally distinctive division. But what happens? They end up doing it behind their back. And that means they're pulling their punches. And what do I mean when I say they're doing it behind their back? Well, they really want to say, we mistreat our long-term customers because we take advantage of them. We offer all the good deals to new people that we want to come to the company, and we don't offer those good deals to long-term customers. And that's wrong. But they just change it very, very gradually because they don't want to say it's wrong. They say, well, we can get a little bit more money here. We can get a little bit more money here. We can get a little bit more money here. And they don't ever announce the change they're making, and they don't do it decisively. So my book and my consulting practice has been to help them come out from behind the closet, from behind the covers, and actually make those changes happen. I can give you the story where it first became really clear to me that that's what I needed to do, if you'd like.
No, that's great. Yeah, I want to hear that. Let me throw something out there because you're into a little bit of my wheelhouse, which quite frankly has led to a point of frustration at a lot of points in life. You know that I did 30 years in the military. So that's a structure that has a strong culture, that has huge values, and you have core values, and we live by those things. They're three-dimensional. They're actually living things. They're like organisms. And a violation of those has penalty for that. And so there's some self-policing. That is one organization. Let me ask you this. How many organizations ask for your help and they say things like, I think everything with the employees and the culture and our values, I think that's all okay. We just have a little bottom line problem over here. We have a little process problem over here. And they want you to go look at those and fix those. Talk to me about that phenomenon where you have to drag, when I say them, I'm talking about people behind glass doors, people that their job titles start with C. Talk to me about the phenomenon and the realization of dragging those people, sometimes figuratively by the tie, across the floor and rubbing their nose in it to say, listen, it's not a process. It's not value stream mapping and taking out a step. It's your culture. Because it's like spraying, air freshener. I grew up on a dairy farm. It's like spraying air freshener in a dairy barn. When that goes away, there's still a bunch of shit on the floor. And sometimes in the C-suite, they've got all this air freshener going on and everything smells fine. And when they leave, you take them out there and you show it to them, their culture's bad. And then they don't know what to do. They're like infants.
You put your finger on the biggest problem. And well, let me tell you my experience.
Sure, yeah. Frame it however you want. I just had to put that out there because you're right into that, and I could feel it. So.
Them not knowing what to do is really the biggest problem.
Sure.
They are not far off the realization that they've got a problem in their culture, generally. We imagine people on that floor up there where you've got 4 corner offices and huge offices and suites. We imagine them actually getting along with each other. And we imagine them getting along with each other and not seeing what's going on below them. That is seldom the case.
Right.
The question I start out asking when I see this problem is, how do you guys come to decisions? What's it like around that C table when you come to decisions? Do you come to decisions quickly? Do you listen to the people below you, have it escalate up to you, and then reach a decision quickly? A little bit of a fight and do it. And the answer is, where you have a bad culture, no. There are 4 general bad cultures that I run into. There could be more, but they're the typical ones. There's a culture of fear. And what happens in a culture of fear? It goes all the way to the top. It's not just that people are afraid of the top guy. People at the top are afraid. And so what do? Well, you're afraid of being called out and having made a mistake. So you deliver reports with appendices, huge appendices, every fact in the world to justify the most trivial thing that you have said. And then you want people to read those reports with those appendices. And people don't. And so decisions don't get made. If you're a culture of resentment, you even will have on the senior table 2 or 3 different sides. There'll be different factions. There'll be the operators. There'll be the people in charge of sales. You might have the corporate services people, legal and finance.
Yeah. Don't forget HR.
Forget HR. And they could see each other, and they frequently do in these kinds of things, as trying to tear apart the soul of the company.
Right.
I mean, the typical one, in fact, I was just in the company yesterday. You've got the sort of the sexy new development technological side of the company and the corporate services side of the company. Each one believes that one is cowboys willing to take risks that will destroy the company. And the other side thinks that they're old, stuck in the mud people who are interested only in safety. They don't make decisions. They go to war. And the CEO, in that kind of a setting, is actually afraid. If he chooses one side or the other, he's created enemies. So that's another negative culture. So you got fear, you got resignation. You find that huge in utilities and so forth. And in resignation, nobody wants to rock the boat. In fact, the boat could be going straight towards an iceberg, and nobody wants to get up to change the course. And again, they don't make decisions. So there are four basic places I go to get people to realize that there's something wrong with their culture. Decision making is the first, and it's the obvious one because people who are sitting around that C-level table believe that they should be exemplary at making decisions. The next place to go, obviously, if you need another place to go, is how they do handoffs between their silos. What happens when you need finance to approve something? What happens when you need HR to approve this new hire? What happens when you need to make this new acquisition to make your business really sing? How do they handle the reports? And you'll find people will say, well, sometimes they do what they say they're going to do. Most of the time they don't. The fact of the matter is, when you have a poor culture, we've done studies on this, and there's a professor at MIT, Don Salt, who's done a lot of studies on this. Only about 25% of the time when you have a bad culture and you need work from people on other sides of the company, do they do it on time and at the quality you need. It's amazing that the companies can survive at that level. So those are two places I go. What do you celebrate? That's always a fun one when there's a culture that's poor. We celebrate the holidays. No successes.
Yeah, I write about that, about the celebration piece, because for a long time I was really bad about that and didn't understand the value of it. So I get it.
So in any case, that's where I go to get them to become aware that there's a culture. For me, I can say, let me just look at the culture of your senior team. And I can promise you that what I find there, that's going to be the best place for your culture. And if that's not good, it's going to be worse going down.
I want to hear your story, because you were going to do your story, and I don't want to leave that off. But remind me to come back to. I want to have a little counterpoint on kind of philosophically how I think, and then hear your viewpoint, because I love this, because really now the conversation, as a kangaroo leader and moving forward, the conversation has really shifted to the things that you work on are like anything else. The success and failure and progress of anything is predicated through the leader. That's family, that's anything. Anything that you do, the leader dictates the tone and the tenor. So hold that thought. Let's hear your story.
By the way, I totally agree with that. I mean, that's not fashionable right now.
Well, it's not because there's, I know so we're talking to the audience now. So I don't want to talk down to you, and you're definitely not going to talk down to me, because you're not that guy, because you know how not to do that. But do a unit climate assessment, do a RAND thing. Have come in and have the scientists ask all the magical questions. And put that in the C-suite. I've watched this happen so many times. Put that in the C-suite and set it down. And every arrow is pointing at them to fix something. It's their problem, right? And in less than 15 minutes, between a bunch of chief executives sitting around a table, they will have spun it in a way that all the employees are crazy. They don't know. They've totally, and the word of the day now is gaslit. They will gaslight the whole organization. And then nothing gets done. The report goes away because it didn't say what they wanted. That's just prevalent. That's epidemic in our country.
Yes. It's a form of, that's another form of a real cultural problem. I call that arrogance. And it takes real brilliance to be able to blow smoke in everybody's eyes. Let's not take that away.
And
from
time
people.
And effort and work and
and to pick things apart in a way that you feel your privilege supported and can make other people feel diminished. It is an art, but it is a crippling art to the company.
So tell me your journey to getting to this point.
Okay.
I grew up in Northern California, by the way, so I am not unfamiliar with UC Berkeley.
So my journey, as I say, I started out believing, distinguished me from other consultants. I believed that leaders had to have a defining passion. And for me, they were like literary characters. They were like Shakespeare's tragic heroes. They had to make their life about the business. And they did. And that showing people that, as opposed to they were leading balanced lives or just saying clever things, was the beginning of my consulting career. What's the value of that, having a defining passion? Well, number one, it makes the strategies you develop that much richer because you're really thinking through things. How do I change the world? How do I change my organization's about? And it makes you more resilient when you take very hard hits. And the first big leader I dealt with was Lorenzo Zambrano, who was the leader of Cemex, who at the time I started working with him had already grown this very small Mexican cement company in Monterrey, Mexico, into roughly the third largest in the world. And it was a global powerhouse. He wanted to go to make it the largest. But he had a defining passion that he got when he went to Stanford. His family owned the majority of shares, so he knew when he graduated from Stanford what he was going to be. But what he discovered at Stanford was financial transparency of the first world. And for him, that was an amazing thing. We take it for granted. But he saw it in all its dimensions. He studied, realized if you're this transparent, people trust you. You can borrow money at a much lower rate. Your shareholders are not going to be asking you the kinds of suspicious questions you get asked in Mexico. It's not, you don't feel like there's anything nefarious in your business. You feel like you're clean. And he went back to Mexico and said, I am going to make Cemex a first world transparent company. And I'm going to do it. We're going to grow. And we're ultimately going to be listed on the New York Stock Exchange. And so his strategies were all to that end. And that meant that there had to be lots of changes that would take place in the company. And he went through one CFO after another to get there, to make those changes. But the interesting thing is, when you have a strategy and when it's a passion like that, people test it. And so the big thing for Cemex, it wasn't actually global at the time, was to start operating in Europe. And the two largest cement companies in the world at the time, Lagrange and Holcim, were both European companies. And he saw that there might be an opportunity to buy a company in Spain.
I was going to say that would be the...
And but he'd need first world debt to do it. And he realized that the first world bankers and bondholders wouldn't give him debt just to go buy something in Europe because they didn't think he could compete. He didn't think that he had what it took to compete there. And so they did a debt offering. He had a clause in it that said if there was a particularly good deal, it was to consolidate all their debt, but if there was a particularly good deal, favorable deal, they could use the money for an acquisition. Well, he wasn't totally transparent. He knew it, but they did it. They made the acquisition in Spain. It worked out very well, but he lost the reputation for being the transparent Mexican company. Now, what would most people do? Well, most CEOs, they'd be agile. They'd say, okay, we're not the most financially transparent company, but we're going to be the fastest growing company or something else.
Right.
He dug in instead, and he insisted that he regain the identity of being the most transparent company in Latin America, first world transparency, and did it and was able to grow at the same time. So he didn't sort of go with the flow. He had this abiding passion, and that made him get his people to work harder and wiser about how to re-achieve what he'd lost for the first growth. And of course, if you're Mexican, you think this is so unfair. We operate cement companies better than anybody else. How can people think that we can't handle Europe? Well, you'd have to deal with that unfairness and handle it. So that was Lorenzo Zambrano. So I worked, and 10 years later, maybe 15 years later, I was working for a gas distribution company in Europe. I have to keep this anonymous. And I just came to work with the leader of the company. after he had faced the biggest crisis he could face. Now, gas distribution companies, they're about distributing gas, and safety is always their number one issue. And to remain safe, what do? You follow all the protocols to the letter. You dot every I, you cross every T. Because if you don't, and something goes wrong, you're going to spend the rest of your life in judicial hearings, at best. So what happened to this guy was the worst thing that could happen if you're in a gas distribution company. There was a gas-fed fire in a multi-story building. The shutoff valves were under meters of concrete. And so what you're supposed to do then is go back and back and back to wherever you can find a shutoff valve and shut off. But the maps of the gas distribution system was in an old city, were ancient, and didn't show where the shutoff valves were. So he called together his senior team, and he said, what do? We need an innovation here. We need to do something that's not in the protocols. And they said, well, we might be able to think of something. Now, I believe that actually the leader, came up with the idea. But together they came up with the idea, we could blow up balloons inside all the pipes we know about that go into this place. I'm not an engineer. Blow up balloons is my way of describing the engineering of it. So I apologize to the engineers in your audience. And they said, we could do that. And he said, okay, let's do it. They said, no. Even if it works, we're all going to be in trouble. And he said, no, okay, I'll make it my decision. We'll put it on the record that all of you said you were against it. I want to do it. They did it. It worked. He probably saved lives. And they were right. When I was there, it was the start of all the judicial hearings. And he was 2 days a week in judicial hearings for years. And he came to me and said, Charles, I did what I really wanted to do. I wanted to make this industry innovative. And we did an innovation. But this is hell. Should I go back? I wish I had not done it. And I had said, no. This is when I realized, this was your act of taking a risk to create your masterpiece, which is to have an innovative gas distribution organization in this part of the world.
And what's the name of your book?
The name of it, thank you for asking. It's Leadership as Masterpiece Creation.
Right. And I threw that in there because you touched on it. You touched on it right there about it's your masterpiece. And so and what you're saying is everybody starts with a blank canvas.
Well, no, generally you start with the traditions that you have, and we got to get them a little bit better, get things working. But this is what you start with. And this is something that's amazing to me. Now, for the last 10 years, when I've gone in to meet a leader, I don't have to deal exactly with what you were talking about. They know that there's something wrong with their culture.
Sure.
But I give them one question that I always thought it would be possible for them to answer. What is the one thing that always goes wrong in your organization or always goes wrong in your industry? And my thought was that would be a very hard thing for someone to answer. But I would say 9 times out of 10, they can tell me. We mistreat our long-term customers. That's one. I just described the one. We put safety above everything else. That was the answer there. We sell by making women or other customers feel anxious about their looks. That's the one Anita Roddick took, obviously, with the Body Shop. In the face of digital transparency, we're all creating sort of phony identities and learning how to lie to each other instead of learning how to tell the truth. Recently, we always create video games for the most macho guys because it's easy. But actually, we think we can create video games that appeal across genders. Mm-hmm. We never do that. And recently, in healthcare, there's no one that is really on the side of the patient when it comes to the insurance coverage. The doctor tries a little bit, but the doctor doesn't have any time, and there's nobody that does it. So people do have a sense of what goes wrong. For me, the fact that they have that sense shows me that they want to do the right thing. That's it. But that is my first question. If I get an answer to that question, I know this is somebody who could build a masterpiece. But the second question is the one that they can't answer, they have a hard time with. And it's because they're brilliant managers. And they've gotten to the top by figuring out ways to avoid the answer to the first question. So the second question is, what would you love to do instead? The fortunate thing is, once somebody has answered the first question, they feel ashamed of not being able to answer the second one. So you can easily keep the conversation going. Would you try this? Would you try this? Would you try this other thing? And once you get that, what they would love doing, then the rest is, what risks do you have to take to get there? And my book is about, how do you take the risks you need to take? How do you put them in order? How do you take them? Because each of the risks are a risk where if you fail, people will say that you did the wrong thing, that you're a bad person.
I write a lot of one-liners in my books at the end, that just for people to be introspective. And it's not all about leadership. Some of it's just about life. And one of the things that has resonated with people that I'll hear them say back to me is, I always tell them, knowledge is power only when shared. And so I have a metaphorical animal, Randy the rat, that I use in my talks. And Randy the rat is actually the real rat that lives in the bottom of the ship, right? And I always ask people, where do rats live on the ship? I get some crazy answers. Oh, the kitchen. Or back in the times, the rats lived in the bottom of the ship. So when people say the rats are jumping ship, that's reference to the fact that the rats know that there's a flaw in the ship, and they're leaving because they know the ship's already sinking, so they're jumping over the ship. So wouldn't it be awesome if the captain had a relationship with the rats at a level that a rat would run up and say, hey, Captain, there's a small leak in the ship, and he could fix that right when it happened. When I give this to senior leaders, they look at me cross-eyed, like, what are you talking about? You're asking me to micromanage. And I'm like, no, I'm asking you to work at a high level of empathy, which goes along with these ethics and these values, and always work off the assumption that everything in the C-suite is not real. You have a false reality, and reality actually lives with the rat. And you can actually get the feedback almost directly from the rat without pissing off the manager and the director and everybody else in between, with the right type of communication. If you share the knowledge of what you need to know, you can gather the knowledge and have that be a collective, and everybody's learning simultaneously. So Randy the rat, when I throw him out there, I get a lot of painful looks in people's eyes. And I think the look is, I know he's right, and there's not a chance in hell I'm going to do it. And it drives me crazy, because I think it's a solution to so many problems. So I don't know if you have an opinion on that. But
I have a strong opinion on that. First of all, let me just say, you're absolutely right. And this is when I approach this in a slightly different way. I'm going to tell you how I approach it. But it is one of the hardest things. And by the way, this is what people are trying to take care of with psychological safety.
Yeah.
This is what people are trying to take care of with radical candor. And they're not getting it, because Randy the rat knows what's true, because Randy the rat is living what's true. Randy the rat is not just sharing some views that Randy the rat has come across or has seen in some management textbook, or thinks are cool, or thinks people will think he's beautiful if he shares those views. Randy the rat is speaking out of what he lives.
He's wet.
He's wet. The water's dripping on him. Right. Yeah, right. So exactly. Now, how do you get Randy the rat to talk? And the answer that I give people, and it's a hard answer, is you, Mr. CEO, Mr. CFO, Mr. CMO, whatever your C letters are after the C, you have to be seeking truth and saying truth. And that means if you're not getting up at 3 or 4 in the morning and saying, what's really going on with my customers? What's really going on with my employees? What's really going on with my suppliers? what's really going on with my owners. And you don't have to do all four every morning.
Right, right.
But it ought to be one where you're saying, they've changed and I don't know. And I gotta find out. Now, if you are in that investigation, you are going to be sympathetic to Randy the Rat coming and saying, I'm wet, we're sinking, we got to fix it now. If you are not in that investigation, if you try to delegate that to someone else, if you're just trying to hide that things are changing, you're not going to be sympathetic to Randy the Rat.
Well, what you get from mid-level management is, I went down and I saw Randy, and I think he might be damp, but I'm sure he's not wet. And I told him that people have been wet before, so don't worry about it. And yeah, all right. And then it's over. And then it's because you've lost your organization at that point in time. There is such thing as playing a game in leadership where one strike and you're out. And I'm very passionate about this. Leaders, you've got to be listen to me, folks. You've got to be really careful because 90% of your organization is a one-strike deal when it gets into values, trust, integrity, and these kind of things. You violate that stuff, and those are core values. Those are core intrinsic values that people were raised with. Values misalignment, that's why your people are leaving. I think that's what Charles is talking to when you talk about cultures.
Yeah, you have to be, and actually, I think it's stronger than missing. For me, leaders, I like to say, this is one of the things where most people would disagree with me. I believe leaders are the moral artists of our time. And by that, I mean, they work off those basic values, but they create a set of values in their company that they consider the most important ones. So Bezos made relentlessness the most important value in Amazon. You have to live that. And that's what gives trust, because you're living this unusual value and you're devoting your life to it. Now, if he strikes out there, then everything he says from that point on is just public relations. It's just advertising. It's just clever. And that means, and this is the killer, it means not just the people down in the mid-level management are going to read him that way and relax. His own senior team is going to do that. He doesn't really mean it. We don't really have to go that extra mile. Just make it look like you're going an extra mile.
This is why football teams halfway through the season fire the coach and not the quarterback. It's that phenomenon.
Yeah.
The coaches set an expectation and a culture that if it lets players work out half as much, not show up on time, those type of things, it's on them. It's on the coach. It's on the CEO. Far too often it's that division over there, they're lazy. No, you better go look at your deputy director or whatever's running the division. You better go look at that person, see what they're doing. Go by their office at 3:00 in the afternoon. Is the door closed? Is the backseat of their car always got golf clubs in it? Go look.
Yeah. I'm totally with you. And in fact, how it happens. First, you let the most talented player off easy. You let the guy. This is the thing that Bezos would never do. I mean, his logistics genius, about as critical to the company as could be, didn't let him off easy. His IT specialist, again, about as critical to the company as could be, he didn't let that one off easy.
And you don't have to work outside of the C-suite. If you manage the C-suite to those expectations, everybody else falls in line. Because they look up and they go, well, if he's doing it to him, he's certainly going to do it to me, good, bad, or indifferent. And then it's easy.
What I like about it is if you do that and you live that way, people will follow you because they admire you.
Yeah.
It's not just because they're getting paid and getting paid on time. It's not just because you run a clean operation. When you do that, you're admirable. And people want to have admirable leaders.
As a follower in 30 years in the military, you're a follower for quite some time, and then you're a leader follower, and then you're a follower leader, and then you're a leader with a little bit when you get to the to the highest levels. I never had any respect or followed in a manner that made me highly energetic with leaders that wanted to be my friend or not tell me the tough things. And the best leaders that I have had in my life are the ones that didn't feel that they cared enough about me to hurt my feelings.
I love that way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you care enough about me to hurt my feelings, then you're invested in me. Because it takes a lot of energy. If you've ever led anybody or disciplined anybody or had a tough conversation with a student that's in a graduate program or trying to get there, any of those things, if you've ever done that, how much energy does that take? It is painful. I mean, you're days ahead trying to shape the environment and shape the conversation and all of these things so that it's almost perfect because you care about how the person receives it and that they grow from that. The easiest thing to do is say, it's no big deal.
Right.
Move on.
It takes lots of composition to be able to speak to people that way. For me, I measure it in sleepless nights. How many nights did I just get up at 3 a.m. figuring out what I had to do, how I had to do it, and then go do it. Some people don't have to have the sleepless nights to do it, but you're right. It takes a huge amount of energy. It takes also respect for yourself and your organization, because if you don't do it, you end up not respecting yourself. You don't respect the work. For me, the place where that came home to me was before I started in business, before I started as a management consultant. When I would look at my fellows, graduate students, and then professors, when it came to assessing student work and giving honest grades for honest work. Why is there such grade inflation? It makes it easier for professors, much easier for professors, to sit down with every paper and say, what is really going right here? What is really going wrong here? I have to think about it. I have to explain it to this person. And I have to let them give an assessment that's commensurate with that. That is very hard work. And it's draining it for a professor, for any leader. That performance that you see in your students, that performance you see in your employees, if you're honest, reflects directly on you.
Yeah. Yes.
For me, how could this student be saying this about Hamlet? Didn't I teach that whole class to get rid of this old wrong view? Where did I go wrong? And in fact, you have to, if you're going to really write a comment that's going to get through to the student and understand where the student got wrong, you have to say where you went wrong. You have to understand that, at least, if you don't have to say it. And so leadership is very self-critical.
Well, you should always have a mirror in your office, because anytime that you're pissed off as a leader, you should get up and go look in the mirror, because that's probably it's the first step in your root cause analysis. You have to do that assessment. You have to do that assessment.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not like you did everything wrong.
No, but
and sometimes this is foolish little thing, but people will copy and learn from. People love imitating your flaws much more than they love imitating your virtues. Your virtues are hard to imitate. Right, your flaws, relatively easy.
So Charles, hold your book up again there and give us the name of it. And I'm going to give you.
It's Leadership as Masterpiece Creation. It's turning your organization into an ethical, moral masterpiece that is different from other places. And my picture, in choosing this cover, I'm imagining all these incredibly beautiful buildings along the canal in Venice are businesses. And they're all different, but they're all admirable and beautiful. That's the kind of world that this book is trying to create.
I love it.
And people who like the book say, to my dismay, Charles, this is a great book because it gave me permission to go out and create my masterpiece. And I said, but what about all the hints inside the book? What about chapter 6, where I say how to do it, or chapter 8, where I tell you how to create the masterpiece strategy? That's all nice. But the important thing in the book is it gave me permission to go and create the masterpiece.
And I think that's a home run. The macro win when you write a book is a home run. The cherry on the top, the extra flavoring, is when somebody takes something completely out of your book and makes it part of their soul, part of their DNA. And that's a big compliment. And the people are doing that. But yeah, that's fantastic. Hey, Charles, I always give my guests an opportunity to leave us with something that's really cool. One takeaway. It can be anything. It doesn't have to be about management or leadership. It can just be anything for life. So.
Wow. Okay. Can I give 2?
Yeah,
I mean, the one
absolutely.
that I feel obliged to give is, please ask yourself, if you're in any leadership position, what always goes wrong here, which I think you know the answer to. What would I love to do instead? Don't give up. Don't give up. Don't require a coach, or if you want, call me up if you want somebody to keep pestering you with that question.
Right.
And then, what are the risks I have to take to get there?
Sure.
That, to me, if you start asking those questions and answer them honestly, you're on your way to creating a masterpiece. And it feels so much better to have a business that really represents you and shows your moral artistry.
Sure.
And so, please feel the permission, this is the second thing, to become a moral artist. If you run an organization, it is your opportunity to become a moral artist. And the opportunity to do good by doing that is so extreme that it's the gratitude you feel for that should drive the moral artistry. I'll leave it there. I can talk a little bit about evil if you want.
Tell us how we can get a hold of you and find your book and all that. And we'll include all this in the social stuff. So
thank you very much, Dave. And let me thank you and your audience. Look, the easiest way to get to me is LinkedIn, Charles Spinosa, LinkedIn hashmarks in Charles Spinosa, but LinkedIn, Charles Spinosa. And the book, the easiest place to get the book is Amazon.
Sure.
So, and it's again, Leadership as Masterpiece Creation.
I love it. I've got a lady that I quasi-mentor, quasi-coach, quasi-cheerlead for, who's just opened her second store in her own business, and she's done it in her own image, but I'm going to turn her on to the book. And
fantastic. I love those small businesses. And, they have so much to treat the C-suite people.
Yeah, I agree so much.
I love your energy, and I really appreciate it. I know you've gone the extra mile for me and for your audience.
Well, I appreciate you appreciating me, because it's always nice to get a little kudos.
Thank you very, very much.
Thanks so much.